Well, hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the Straight Outta Prison podcast. My name is James K. Jones, and this is my story.
And this is Haley Jones, and this is his story that has now become a part of my story.
Well, the last part of the story that we taped about my granny, that was very emotional. And I actually, when I was listening to it, I thought, people are wondering, why did you put this in there? Like, why couldn't you just say she passed away? But it was really a huge part of getting me to the next place. But at the same time, you were going through a similar situation with your dad, but it was sudden, unexpected, and blindsided you.
Yes. Well, I mean, to speak to, people might think, oh, why did you put that in there? I think all these pieces come into play, like pieces and people, like relationships, even from your prison days. Yeah. And I mean, we talked about the backstory, you being in prison and your time there and coming out. And I think it's all these pieces and times and season like that are woven together that got us to where we are now.
Woven. So, I like that.
Woven. Is that a word? I
think
it's a word. Yeah.
I think woven is a word.
Yeah.
If something is weaved together, it's woven.
That's
maybe
true.
not. I have to.
Okay, so that is very interesting, and I haven't even thought about that really till we've started talking about it in terms of this podcast and what we're going to share.
Yeah.
That what year was that with your granny?
2012.
2012. So she went to heaven March 2012.
Of course, it's about 2 months before your dad.
Okay. Yeah. So my dad went in June 2012. But also interesting that my grandmother, my Aunt Mom, I loved my Aunt Mom. She was the only grandmother I ever knew because my dad's mom passed away before I was born.
Yeah.
But she went to heaven April 2012.
Wow.
So, and she did in my parents' house. She had come to live with my mom and dad. She had dementia.
Yeah.
So we knew it was coming. And
you're prepared for it.
I was prepared for it. And, she was my grandmother, like I said. So it's kind of hard because from April when she passed away and went to heaven to June when my dad passed away and went to heaven. Now, my dad's was very unexpected.
Yeah.
So to think about the grief of my grandmother, I'm not going to say I don't remember it. I do remember it, but I think what was to happen a couple months later just like trumped
blindsided
that
you.
Loss, the loss of my dad trumped. Yeah. So, so how did that all come to be? I mean, I guess I first need to kind of look backwards and say, and I think I've said this before, maybe not, but that me moving to Alabama and being here and having the opportunity to work with my dad and just to reestablish that adult-to-adult relationship with him in the last year and a half of his life has been one of the greatest gifts and times that I've received or lived through.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Now, and I've said this before, but I mean, I was living in the midst of it. It was a very hard season for me, but yet little did I know it was the last year and a half I was going to have my dad here with me.
Yeah, I had no idea.
So, well, where should I start?
Well, we met in May of 2012, briefly. You know, the infamous facts you wanted me to do with you.
Yeah.
When I went in, I met your dad. I spent like 30 minutes talking to him, and it was just a really neat conversation. He was very interested in me, what I was doing. Asked a ton of questions, and he was trying to get me to come to some business networking thing. So I said no.
Which was my thing.
Yeah, well, I didn't know it at the time. And I said, look, I'm just going to shoot straight with you. I'm so overwhelmed and underwater right now trying to figure out this thing because I got 2 restaurants and I'm so busy. I'll take you up on it, but give me a couple months to get my feet under me. And he said, okay, but that would be the only conversation we ever had. And then after that, Denise Nolan, who was my fiery redheaded manager in Gardendale, she had like a girl crush on you. Like she thought you hung the moon, and she wanted to set us up. She kept telling me about this Haley Hobart, and she's a go-getter, and she's beautiful. And I remember you would like start having your little business meetings in Kairos.
Your little business meetings?
No, but I would come out there and I would just see. I really wasn't looking for a relationship, but I was interested, but you were just out of my league. Like I can specifically remember one time you had a little business meeting. You come sauntering in with your little clipboard and your little books, and You had on your little long skirt and your sandals and your shiny lips, and I was like, there ain't no way. Like, she's like one of those uptown girls, and she's not looking for a downtown man. But Denise, she kept, like, started off gently because she knew me. Like, don't try to push me into nothing. But she was always dropping the hint. Like, I remember she took pictures of you eating with your friends on Facebook and would post it, and like, there's that Haley again. And she started getting slightly annoying me, and I finally told her, she's out of my league. Like, I wouldn't even shoot for that. That's not the kind of girl.
No.
I mean, just, that was what I felt.
Yeah.
But in the middle of all that, it was sometime in June. It was right after we opened. But somehow I got on an email chain that was from the Gardendale community, and I don't even know how I got on it. But your dad was going in for a routine surgery, and you might want to just explain what that is. But I was actually in my office for 2 or 3 days, reading those, getting the updates and praying for y'all, and it feels weird now, but it was, I don't even know how I got on that chain.
Yeah,
but,
I don't either.
But a backstory on that, heart trouble runs in your dad's family.
Yes.
And he was the first person in like 3 or 4 generations to ever meet a grandchild.
That's correct.
Because his dad died of heart trouble when he was, 16?
Yeah, I think my grandfather was 42, but my dad was 16. Yeah.
And then his father died of heart trouble too. Mm-hmm. So it was like a thing, like a genetic deal. But your dad was aware of it. He tried to take care of himself, did all the healthy things. Mm-hmm. But he was going in for a routine, like some kind of bypass heart surgery. They said there was like a 1% chance that anything could go wrong. Yeah,
it was something that they do every day. Yeah, I think they said, 2% chance that things go wrong with these. It's
very
routine. Like, he'll be able to come home like that day or the next day.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was not supposed to be a big thing. I mean, anytime you're dealing with your heart, I guess, it's something. But
it had become routine.
Right.
Easy surgeries.
So, but before we get to that, it's funny though, because my dad, because of what you just said with the history of the heart disease in his family and his dad dying early.
Yeah.
He always was, I don't know, he was not afraid of dying, or it was like in the forefront of his mind. He was always prepared. Yeah. He always wanted to feel like he was prepared if something did happen. And I mean, I can remember even like I was a teenager, like anytime he got on a plane, he was like, he was ready. All his papers and stuff were in order. He would tell mom where things are. But he was not laughing about it. He was like so serious.
He wanted to make sure y'all were taken care of.
Yeah, and that things were ready if he died. And so, and even around Christmas time, I mean, I remember this being a thing, like even as a kid or like middle school, high school, that my dad always kind of got in a funk around Christmas time. And I remember asking my mom at one point what was wrong, and she said, well, this season always brings him back to when he lost his dad on Christmas Day.
Yeah. Oh, his dad died on Christmas Day?
On Christmas Day.
Oh, wow.
And he was in his room showing him a present that he had gotten or something he had gotten, and he fell over and died.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah, so it always got him in this funk that he just couldn't really shake, really. But, I mean, it didn't, like, overshadow Christmas or anything like that, but I could just tell he struggled emotionally.
Yeah.
I mean, the older I got, the more I realized that was happening. But he was obsessed on that note with the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which all kind of like fits together, really. If you've seen It's a Wonderful Life, I mean, it's a classic old Christmas movie where this man gets in money trouble, and then he asks, like, it would be better if I wasn't here, and then he granted that, and what life would be like for him and other people if he wasn't there. My dad was obsessed with that movie.
That's a neat movie.
But he was also obsessed with his legacy, obsessed with what he was doing now that was going to matter later. That was his big thing. So he really did, a lot of people say those things, and I feel like carry that torch. And but my dad, I really feel like when the rubber meets the road and you are gone, like, then you know what you actually were doing for when you were gone. And he really did as he would say, like, write that love letter that was going to get to keep being read and keep being passed down through, my mom and then
all of us.
And then all of us, yeah. So,
well, your mom tells a story was that his first grandson, that was Abby's son when he was born, he kind of got his feelings hurt that he wasn't named after him. But it was just like a mild irritation, and he pushed through it. But now, on this side, our son, Royal Grant's named after him. Abby's got a son, Zeke Grant, that's named after him. Luke Grant, Hobart, Hobie's son.
There's Grants everywhere.
And then Katie's son.
My cousin, yeah.
His
Grant.
Her first son's name is Grant. So now there's 4 Grants.
And they are all after my dad, yeah.
Yeah, that's neat.
That is fun. He would love that.
He would. So lead us up to, I know one of my funny stories that I like is the last dinner y'all had at Piff Chang's, the night before surgery.
Yeah, just the night before the surgery. I mean, like I said, it wasn't supposed to be a big thing, but he always, for anything, was like,
he felt it.
Okay, let's be ready, And so they went to the pre-op or whatever the night before. The night before the surgery. So we went to the doctor's appointment, whatever. Then we went out to dinner, and he was going into surgery the next morning.
And he ordered a beer?
Well, he ordered a beer. We went to P.F. Chang's, and he ordered a beer, which was, common for him.
But your mom called him.
My mom was like, Grant, didn't they say no alcohol like the night before? Because he had to be in there at 5 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was just like, whatever. He was like, that he definitely did not follow
the instructions
protocol. Yeah, so
sounds like I'm cut from the same cloth and stuff like that. If it don't matter,
hindsight too. Just like that was his last beer.
Wow,
my golly, enjoy that beer.
Wow, that's neat.
He didn't know that, but
I've heard you tell stories. But one of my favorite stories is the last time that your cousin Katie talked to your dad. I wish she was here to tell this. Like, we could get it. She tells it she's going to tell it way better than...
This is great.
Forgive me if I slaughter it. But your dad was a father figure to her growing up. She has a dad. Mm-hmm. Your dad was just she was his only niece, and he loved Katie.
He did.
And she spent summers with y'all.
Yes.
And so she saw him as a father figure.
For sure.
And Katie is Catholic, but she's like the serious Catholic.
Or you could say a practicing Catholic.
Well, she does.
A devout Catholic.
She does all the things. Like when I met Katie, she said, "I'm not a cafeteria Catholic." And I was like, "What does that mean?" She's like, "Well, you pick and choose. We do it all." So I was like, "Okay." But your dad grew up Catholic, and he called her, I think it was the day before, and it was the last conversation she had with him.
Yeah.
And he said, "Katie, I'm going under the anesthesia, and I just want to make sure all my bases are covered, and I want to ask you to pray for me, because if I get up there and God is Catholic and he's not Protestant, I just want to make sure I got some Catholic prayers going up for you." And it's just so, it's humorous, and it's funny, and it's beautiful, and it's all the things. But your dad was so much to you, but to so many people. Like, I still meet people sometimes. We were at a wedding last year, and some guy comes up and in tears talking about your dad, and it's from when he was in high school, and he's like my age, and I'm like, wow, this man has touched so many lives. He's made such an impact.
Yeah.
And I believe he still continues to make an impact through all of us.
Absolutely. My dad would always say, it is funny how the similarities between you and him. He would say what he thought, and there was no holding back. And sometimes you love that, sometimes you hated that. But he...
See, I understand that.
Yeah. But he was also just an encourager. Speaking of Katie again, it's just a story that I remember. He did this several times for me too, but she was heartbroken. Some guy she was dating, I think in high school or beginning of college. And I don't remember the exact situation, but he had broken up with her or just, became disinterested. And she was just heartbroken and talking to my dad about it. And my dad very quickly... And my dad was able to do this so well and so smart, like bringing context. He's like, okay, Katie, let me explain something to you. He goes, some guys, they just drive a Ford. They just drive a regular ass Ford, He goes, but some guys want the Porsche. and you're the Porsche. So you just need to wait for the guy that can appreciate the Porsche, that wants to drive the Porsche.
And do all the extra.
Because that's obviously not your guy.
Yeah.
So it's just such like, and of course she's like, yeah, I'm a Porsche.
And she did wait for a Porsche, and she got him.
She did. Yes, she did. But he was just always could see the best. He chose to believe the best. Mm-hmm. And he just saw things that kind of, like what the Bible says, saw things that were not yet as though they were, and spoke to that. And because of that, I mean, I think a lot of that gift that he had, that he kind of instilled in me, is how I was able to do so many things and accomplish so many things. The day of the surgery, Didn't you say he was joking around at breakfast? Like, what if I die? I'm ready. He was like... Well, he wasn't even joking, but he was serious. Like, like I said, he had done this every time anything small, He had walked Mom through and just like, this is where this is where all the passwords are. Yeah. These are the papers you're going to need for this, that, and the other. He had it all organized. Mm-hmm. And that morning... for breakfast, Mom and Dad were having coffee. I did not live with them at this point, but they were having coffee, and Mom told me later that he said that morning, honey, and this part he had never said before. He had always been prepared and told her he was prepared for the logistic stuff and all that. But this morning he was speaking to his mind being prepared, I guess, and his heart being prepared. And he told Mom, he said, honey, I just feel like, if today is my time, then I'm ready. And I feel like I've done everything I can to take care of you and make sure, every decision I've made, that you're going to be good for 20 years and not 21, 20 years. And you're not going to have to skip a beat. And just the relationships with my kids, like, today's my time. Like, I'm ready. And later Mom said there was something different in his voice that morning, because before, he was prepared, but there was a lot of fear. Yeah. And that particular morning, that fear wasn't there. And so, of course, she didn't think all of that at the time, because it was just like another one of his, like, okay, like let him get it out, Mm-hmm. But she said later that just brought her a lot of peace, because she's like, do we know when we're leaving? Did he know? I don't think he knew, but he somehow, sometimes we sense things, you know. So they went in for the surgery. I would say my one regret that morning was that I didn't get there in time to kiss him before he went back for the surgery. Yeah. And I know that seems like small, but... That's not small. It is small if you compare it to what I feel like the gift I got that with my dad that I know most people do not get, I'm fully aware, is that I don't think anything was left unsaid. I don't think there was any kind of things from like childhood or like bitterness or... No regrets. There was no regrets, that we had flushed everything out. The last year and a half allowed us to do that as adults. Mm-hmm. We talked about things that maybe just came up that would have never come up, or we've never talked about if I hadn't moved here. Mm-hmm. My dad was big on like, we're going to sit at this table and get it all out until it's all out, and nobody's leaving the table until, not that we're going to agree or come to be of one mind, but everybody needs to be able to get out everything they want to get out. And so, anyway, there was no regrets in terms of that. And I just feel like I'm just so grateful for that. But the one small regret is that I didn't get to kiss him before they wheeled him back. But little did we know, you know. You didn't know. But I do know that when... Can I interject like an Abby story? Is this about the kissing thing? Yeah, or are you going to say it? I was about to say that. Say it. Okay. I love that. I love that story. So... Of course, my dad was joking around with the nurses because that's what he did. But when they were about to wheel him off, he told my mom, he's like, okay, one more kiss and give me lots of tongue. And of course, my mom was embarrassed because she was very... And, but my mom was so cute because later she's like, and I did give it to him. Which is so unlike my mom. But I think something in her was glad she did, even though... Abby told she didn't want to. Abby told that story at our wedding. He was like,
Abby was like, that was my dad's last words to my mom. So James would expect nothing less of you for my sister.
That's true. He loved my mom. He was very physical touch was his thing. Like he wanted all the physical touches. So anyway, so they wheeled him off and I got there shortly thereafter and waited with my mom in the waiting room. And, within an hour or so, it wasn't too long, they came out and said, give him 30 more minutes to kind of wake up a little bit and y'all can go back there. Everything went great. We're good to go.
So y'all are feeling good?
Yeah. I mean, it was just like, okay, awesome. And
was it just you and your mom there?
Yes. At that time, it was just me and my mom there. And so about 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, we're waiting in the waiting room for them to come tell us we can go back and see him. Mm-hmm. And the same nurse came out and she was running. She was like frantic, like came into the door like, Luann Hobart, called us out in the hallway. And you could tell there was a sense of urgency. She was talking 90 miles a minute. Couldn't really understand what she was saying. And mom was wanting to ask questions slowly. She was kind of this slow processor. Say that again. Hold on. Yeah. And I started to understand, she wants her to sign this paper so they can open him up, open up his chest. And she needs consent from my mom to do that. I was like, so just sign the paper, mom, sign the paper. We'll ask questions later. I kind of felt that and so that's what she did. She signed it and she promised she would come back and so she ran with that paper. I don't know if they had already opened them, but you need consent apparently.
Yeah.
You
have to have consent for everything.
Yeah. And he was not conscious, but they were cutting his chest open. So at that point we really didn't know what was happening or something was wrong, obviously. But we didn't know what, and I knew that they were doing something open heart surgery.
Yeah.
On the fly.
I somehow got on the email chain with all the updates for that, which is kind of weird now to think about that, but that's tough. So
it was tough, and it was all kind of a little bit of a blur. So once they opened him up and eventually someone came back out to tell us that when he was in the recovery room, he went into cardiac arrest and they did not know why or what. And that's why they needed to open him up and see what was going on. And that he actually had coded on the table and they had to do the electric shock thing.
Does that mean you died?
Yes. That your heart stops.
Oh, wow.
And that they had to shock him. You've seen, I'm sure, on the TV shows where they shock them. And I didn't understand this at first because they were telling us how many times they had to, I think it was 72 total. And I was like, how do they do that if they're opened up? But apparently there's these little things that you clip on the inside that shocks your heart back into.
Yeah.
And so they said we did have to shock him, shock his heart back into, it was, I want to say 72. I don't know if that was the total, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
And they finally got him stabilized, they said, but his chest was still open and they still were not sure why or where it was coming from or what artery or whatever. Long story short, in the next, 36 hours, they opened him up, opened and closed him 3 different times.
Oh, wow.
For the same reason. And, they did tell us this from the front end that every time you open him back up, it's more trauma to his body. It's a bigger risk and less likely you're going to come back for it, but you don't have a choice if, your heart keeps stopping and they don't know why. Mm-hmm. And so the third time I remember it just being this decision on my mom. Of course she was deferring to us too some, just like they say, it's a third time. It's not good, obviously.
Yeah. And by this time you're there for 2 or 3 days?
Well, okay, so the surgery was Friday morning. Mm-hmm. He went to heaven on Sunday afternoon. So, it wasn't that long.
Yeah.
So it was all happening a lot. And
I remember your mom telling me, I think she said y'all were in a hotel room or something.
So
you wanted to get some sleep real quick.
Well, I'll get to that.
Okay, I'll leave that out.
So the third time we decided, it's kind of like a Hail Mary,
Yeah.
this is the last shot, basically is what he said. to see what's going on because we can't just keep opening and closing his chest, you know. And so what they said they were going to do is open him back up, and they keep your chest open. So it's like a open wound, and it's just to be able to monitor. I mean, it's very risky, but it's also like, so you don't have to keep having the trauma, and he had already endured so much trauma.
Yeah.
And so they kept his chest open basically and like covered it and had all the things going on. But by this time, they did let us back there to see him, but it was, I mean, anyone who's had a loved one in the hospital hooked to a lot of machines and had any kind of trauma like that knows that it's very...
It sucks.
There's no words, really.
No.
It's just hard to see and hard to take in. It's just, and it's so much to take in, you know?
Yeah.
And so that night he was stabilized after the third time they opened him and left him open. I mean, you know, he has machines doing work for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my mom's friends, people had started coming in by this time, like driving in, flying in. Ooh. One of my mom's friends said, because one thing I'm very grateful for is that I was the only child that wasn't married and didn't have kids. So it was easy for me to stay with mom.
Your mom, yeah.
And even now, being married and having kids, I totally understand. I mean, it was hard for Hobie and Abby because they were both married with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And just feeling, I mean, your responsibilities at home with your kids. And that must have been hard for them. I feel like I have more empathy for them feeling like they wanted to be there but couldn't because, you know. But I do think it was a gift for me that I could just be with my mom and have no other. I mean, I just lay everything down, you know. I don't have those kind of responsibilities. So I was up there with my mom 24/7, and we hadn't slept, you know, the Friday night. It was coming into Saturday night. I mean, no sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of her friends got us this hotel room that was close to the hospital. And he was stabilized, you know, ish. And it's like, I really think that y'all should try to get a couple hours of sleep. You know, not the whole night. It's fine. But like, you know, a couple hours. So I think we got to the hotel. I mean, it was late. It was probably like midnight. Something like that, because it was still a touch and go situation.
Yeah.
And so we went to sleep, and at about 4:30 in the morning, I heard my mom up and in the bathroom, and she was washing her face and just getting ready. And there was just a real calm about her, like a real peace, which if you know my mom, she had that in general.
Yeah,
but
she's a rock.
She had a real calming presence, and but this felt different. It felt very, I mean, for lack of better words, just like supernatural, I guess. And she said, I'm just gonna go up to the hospital, and you know, me and my aggressive ways, like I'm like, well, I'm going with you. And she's like, no, honey, it's okay. I was like, no, if you're going, I'm going. Especially when I'm sad or emotional. Like sometimes for me, that emotion can come out like aggressive anger.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, I'm going with you. She said, okay, but you know, I want a little time. I want a little time with your daddy. I said, okay, that's fine. I'm going with you, but you can go in there, have some time, but I'll just be right outside, okay? So I got my clothes on, and we went, and she requested if she could go in there with my dad, and she spent about an hour with him, and that was Sunday morning. And later she had told me that the Lord had woken her up and had told her that it was my dad's time to go. And that she needed to go tell him that it was okay to let go. And so that's why she didn't want me coming with her. And But she's just said that she knew that she heard that. She knew that in her spirit. She knew that in her heart. And that she needed to go tell my dad that it was okay. And so she did. And she didn't tell me that at the time, like I said. And we didn't really know. We were still holding out hope. But probably about 9, 10 a.m., the doctor came and said that things were starting to shut down. His body organs were starting to shut down. And that just through the trauma and through that it looked like that today was going to be the day. And so we all went in there. And it's so crazy because he was hooked up to, literally dozens of machines, like dozens, multiple. He was swollen. He didn't look like himself at all. But somehow I just know that he knew that we were there and that he could hear us. And several family members had gotten there, like extended family, like my Aunt Nora and my cousin Katie and Uncle Tommy, and a lot of their close friends were there. And they all came in, groups by groups. And I cannot explain this, and it sounds so silly, but there was this one friend who I shall not name, came in there and was talking like, "We love you, Grant," but he was like yelling. And, "We love you so much, Grant," and it was like, it was super sweet, but it's like, I knew that my dad was annoyed. And I know that my dad was like, "I'm not deaf, Steve." I could just see it in his face, and I leaned down to my dad's ear. I'm like, "I know it's annoying." And so it was just funny that I still know that I know that me and my dad were like vibing in that moment, because it was.
I went through that with my granny because Steve had told me to play worship music, and I was playing worship music on my phone. Her face, like she was not conscious, but her face was like, "JJ, stop." Mm. And I knew it. I was like, I'm sorry, Granny. I'm trying to overdo things.
And I would learn later that in situations like that, that people's hearing is the absolute last thing to go.
Really?
So, anyway, that's a little side note. But so we were in there. Not even that's a little bit of a blur. I do remember that, but, we made the decision, or my mom made the decision, with us, that it was obvious to unhook all the machines, and it feels like surreal even now, that it happened that way, that he's gone, that, it's such a massive loss. But one funny thing is that my dad, this is random, and I'm like, he had no butt. He was like,
no butt?
Yeah. He was just like one of those flat butts. As people were like, where is this going? But my mom always had this she was thick and juicy.
Yeah.
And he always from the time I can remember,
her daughter's thick and juicy too, my wife.
That my mom would be walking in front of him, whether on the beach, grew up on the beach, or just a walk in the neighborhood. And he was like, "Woo, this is the best view in Florida. This is the best view in Alabama. Baby Got Back." That was his favorite. He loved singing the "Baby Got Back" song.
Yeah.
By Sir Mix-a-Lot. Uh-huh. And he was just, he was funny, but he did love my mom's butt, and would always, much to her embarrassment, would, make comments on it.
Yeah, for those of y'all that don't know, Mom Lou was uber proper. Everything was.
Yeah, so anyway, my cousin, we were standing outside the room, I guess, right before the unhooked machine, somewhere in there, we were waiting. She's like, "I don't know, this just feels so we need to do something. Should we sing his favorite song?" We stood in a circle and we prayed.
Yeah.
My mom and the kids and, a couple of the closest family, and we prayed. And then when we got done praying, I forgot who said it. It was just like, I feel like, should we sing a song? Should we sing his favorite song? And my mom was like, well, the only song that's coming to mind that I can think of, and I know this is terrible, but is That Baby Got Back song. I don't think that's appropriate to sing here now.
I like big butts, and I cannot lie.
So, did
y'all sing it?
No, it was just funny. But I mean, everyone did laugh because it was so my dad, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we waited. They unhooked the machines, and we waited, and he left, and
quickly, like right then. Or?
It didn't take long. It took some minutes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it didn't take long. And I think everyone was just in shock, but I don't know if I've told this story on this here before, but you know, after it was done within the hour, I was walking outside the hospital, walking from inside to outside, and I just like, why? I mean, I just remember my head just like, why? Like, that's the only question I just like, and I remember opening the door from the inside to the outside, and in my head, I thought, like, he didn't even get to walk me down the aisle. And as sure as, like, my arm is attached to my body, I heard the Lord say, he's been walking you down the aisle for 32 years. Which is such a profound truth, and that has stayed with me just in terms of he had been walking me down the aisle for 32 years. He loved me. He protected me. He took care of me. He cheered me on. He was my biggest fan. And, you know, up to you, like, loved me like no other man had loved me. He had loved my mom. He showed me what that looked like. And, you know, sometimes we focus on, you know, you're in your pretty dress and you're walking down that aisle and all the attention and time and resources goes into that one little walk down the aisle, when really that's just symbolizing the aisle that we need to be walking down and investing in the people we love and doing what we know we should be doing leading up to that moment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just, when I heard that, it was just like peace, like he has been. And what a gift I got. And
you embraced that too. That's a beautiful.
I did, yeah. And that was a gift that not every woman gets. And I got that gift, and I'm grateful for it. And so, you know, we start making the arrangements. You know, it's still just like shock. You know, the stages of grief. The first is shock and denial. And for me, that just in my mind, just like, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. I just cannot believe this just happened. And so once we got, you know, things sorted and we went home, I happened to be the first one to get back to my parents' house.
Yeah.
That Sunday afternoon, evening, whenever it was. It was still light outside. I remember that. But my parents had this stairs. So it was, you know, 2-story, actually 3. But, you know, you come in the front door and there's upstairs, downstairs, and there's stairs coming down.
Yeah.
And my parents had this bench, like just a nice bench, like at the bottom of the stairs against the wall. And I remember I came into the house and I just sat on that bench and just, you know, just the first time back in the house, knowing, I mean, my parents moved there to relocate. They had only been there a couple years now for him to be gone. It was just quiet, but I felt like I got this vision of my dad in heaven, and he was young, he was good looking, just like the absolute best physical version of himself. And that was kind of neat. So, I mean, I believe that's how we are in heaven, because I don't know that, but I believe that. And so Yeah, the days after were hard and beautiful. I mean, I hate that people come together for funerals. I mean, it's awesome, and they tell stories, and
funerals are tough.
Yeah.
We learned, they taught us in Hines College, when you go to a funeral, it's not about the person that died. Funerals are not for dead people. Funerals are for the living. Like, you're supposed to focus on, like, the family and the people that are grieving. So that's why we do funerals. And that really has changed my, like, mind about dealing with grief and death and stuff like that.
Well, I think that too speaks to what I loved most about that time, is that people just start telling stories.
Yes.
Like stories on stories. And of course with my dad, there was just a lot of funny stories. But it's also the stories of things and lessons and things that stay with us, that are instilled in us, that live on because of him. And that is a beautiful...
And that's legacy.
Part of that, yeah. So, like I said, I mean, it was hard for everybody, but I was able to come and stay with my mom and live with my mom.
You actually slept in the bed with her the first week or two.
I did.
That's a beautiful thing.
And it was so hard, but also such a beautiful gift to be able to walk that out with her hand in hand. And
then at his memorial funeral, you actually gave the eulogy.
I did. Yeah.
That is impressive to me that you could pull that together. Or it was impressive to me at the time, but now knowing you now, know Haley's going to figure it out and snap back.
It's funny because I knew that it had been decided that, I was going to give it, that I was going to be the representative of our family that spoke. And, but I couldn't get the words. I could not get the words, until the morning of, actually. I woke up in the middle of the night at 2:00, and I just felt like it poured out of me. My dad had used this with his staff, with his team members, with us, using, a word that he felt described them, and a word that he appreciated that kind of... spoke to their character. He had done it at Christmas parties, giving everyone a word, something he loved. So I just was like, okay, I'm going to build it around 3 words that I feel like.
Do you have that written? You have that written down somewhere?
Yes, I do.
I may put that in the show notes.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a blessing to put that in the show notes.
And what's so funny, so the 3 words were passion, humor.
This is why I said I would put it in the show notes.
Well, the reason I was going to say is because the 3 words made up, and someone told me this later. They were like, that was brilliant. And I was like, because he had a PhD in life.
So what was
they started with PhD. Yeah. But I didn't do that on purpose. That was a complete coincidence. I was like, I'm just brilliant. I didn't even know that I did that.
Discipline or determination? We'll look it up. We'll put it on the show notes.
Yeah. Anyway, so...
his life, just like, I said in the last one, my granny's life was a legacy that she left for many people, but for me and our family present day, and was a huge part of our story. Your dad's life was the same. He left such a legacy with you that I actually also get to enjoy now. Mm-hmm. And we leave behind relationships and things that we've put into people. I mean, it's not just... Life is not just about making money and having fun and dying. It's you leave things here when you go, and that's the beautiful thing about legacy. And in our first year of marriage, your mom let me have an iPad that belonged to your dad, and I got to read all his notes and all his things, and I'm still fascinated by him. I have most of his books. But we've only had one conversation, and this. If I could do that one conversation over, what would that look like? But just to tie this back together for our time, this was 2012. I actually got a call where they asked me to cater the memorial service. So I actually did the food and catered your dad's memorial. Yeah. And I only knew you. I met him once. I didn't really know you, but then I'd never met any of your other family. But that was something about that later on was like, that's kind of special, and I didn't even know.
Yeah, that is so crazy, actually, because we had been introduced, but I mean, that's it, you know.
Yeah, no, there was nothing there.
But that you did the food for all the family, and
it's
like
crazy.
After the service, yeah, that was crazy.
That's
amazing. Neat. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, these two Straight Out of Prison podcasts were very emotional. Hopefully,
rough.
we'll try to get a little more upbeat on the next one, but there was a few more bumps in the road coming for me anyways.
Well, I want to say, too, that a quote that my dad was obsessed with, that he actually had it on his tagline for his email when he went to heaven. At the time they went to heaven, but for the months prior, he was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I feel like did I say this last week?
You said it on there in the Gap.
Okay.
Or the For Real. It wasn't on this platform.
And I just love it. And I feel like we all need to, and it doesn't take away from the grieving or all that. I know that firsthand.
Yeah.
But it's by Dr. Suess, and the quote is, "Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened."
Wow, it's a beautiful note to leave us on. And that's a good recipe for life.
It is.
Well, all right, guys, we thank you for your support. Thank you for continuing to listen to our story, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
See you soon. Well, hey, guys, we hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Written and produced by the Team Jones Company.
Yours truly, James and Haley Jones.
If you like what you've heard, you can subscribe to all of our podcasts.
Download the Patreon app. You can get all of our content early and ad-free. Straight Out of Prison, the For Real, and Narrowing the Gap. There's a specialized feed there for all subscribers. You'll get downloads, updates, exclusive contents, live Q&As, and more.
Or head over to teamjones.co/podcast and click on the Become a Patron button.
And I'll also put that in the show notes.
Other ways you can support us is to like and share, leave a rating and review, and support our sponsors. They help us provide this platform for free.
Listen on Apple, Google, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.
And thank you again for being a part of our story.
Oh, I love that. Anything out of these videos, please hit the like button, the subscribe. If you never want to miss a recipe or anything I do, hit the little bell and you'll get notifications.